Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night with that unsettling feeling that something fundamental is shifting around you, but you can't quite identify what it is? It's as if you're on a train that has begun to change direction so subtly that only your body notices, while your conscious mind has yet to register the turn. This is precisely the situation we find ourselves in today as a species. We are living not merely through another era of change, but through a change of era so profound that our minds, shaped by millennia of evolution to detect immediate and tangible threats, can barely comprehend its magnitude. What is happening now is not just another chapter in human history, but potentially the beginning of an entirely new story, one in which the very meaning of being human is being redefined before our eyes. And the most extraordinary part is that, unlike every major transformation of our past, this one is happening consciously and largely by our own hands. To truly understand the extraordinary moment we are living in, we must look back at the arc of our journey as a species. For hundreds of thousands of years, Homo sapiens lived in a world where change was extremely slow. A hunter-gatherer who lived 70,000 years ago would have had skills and knowledge very similar to those of his ancestors 100,000 years earlier. Tools, beliefs, and social structures evolved at a pace that was almost imperceptible within a single lifetime. Our ancestors were born, lived, and died in worlds that remained essentially the same. This was the environment in which our psychology evolved, where our fears, desires, intuitions, and cognitive capacities were shaped. We evolved to thrive in a world of relative constancy, where understanding the past was a reliable guide for navigating the future. Then, about 12,000 years ago, the agricultural revolution occurred, the first great conscious transformation we imposed on our way of life. We stopped being nomads, following the natural flow of the seasons and the movements of animals, and we began to settle in one place, actively manipulating our surroundings. We started to domesticate plants and animals, to create food surpluses, to build cities, and thus increasingly complex and hierarchical societies. This transformation profoundly altered not only how we lived materially, but also how we organized ourselves socially and how we conceived our relationship with the natural world and with time itself. Yet even after the agricultural revolution, the life of an ordinary peasant in 1700 would not have been radically different from that of a peasant in 500 BCE. The basic technologies for plowing the land, building shelters, treating illnesses, and educating children remained remarkably stable for millennia. The next great acceleration came with the Industrial Revolution, which began in the 18th century and intensified in the 19th. For the first time, the pace of technological and social change became noticeable within an individual's lifetime. Someone born in 1760 could, in old age, see steam locomotives crossing landscapes that in childhood were traveled only by horses and wagons. Mass production, rapid urbanization, new forms of energy, all of this radically transformed the social fabric and humanity's relationship with time and space. Yet, even with all these changes, the foundations of what it meant to be human remained relatively stable. We still were born, grew, learned, worked, formed families, aged, and died in recognizable cycles, even if the settings of those cycles were changing rapidly. Now, we stand at the threshold of a transformation qualitatively different from anything we have ever experienced. We are not merely changing our external environment or our technologies, we are beginning to intervene directly in the fundamental processes that define what we are as a species. The convergence of revolutions in biotechnology, nanotechnology, computer science, and especially artificial intelligence is creating possibilities that would have seemed like pure science fiction just a generation ago. We are gaining the power to redesign our bodies, extend our cognitive abilities, create intelligent non-human entities, and potentially transcend many of the biological limitations that have always defined the human condition. Think of genetic editing through CRISPR technology, which already allows us to modify human DNA with unprecedented precision. In a few years, we may not only eliminate devastating genetic diseases, but also potentially select and enhance desirable traits in our children. Think of brain-machine interfaces being developed technologies that will allow increasingly deep integration between our minds and external devices, radically expanding our cognitive capacities. Think of longevity research that could, in the coming decades, significantly extend human life, perhaps even pave the way toward a form of practical immortality. And perhaps most transformative of all, think of the accelerated development of artificial intelligence, which is creating entities whose abilities in some dimensions already surpass our own. It is easy to talk about these technologies in abstract terms as mere tools that we can choose to use or not according to our convenience. But that is a profoundly inadequate understanding of what is truly happening. These are not just new tools, but transformational technologies with the potential to fundamentally redefine what it means to be human. Historically, we have always understood ourselves in contrast to the world around us. We were the only beings capable of complex symbolic language, long-term planning, artistic creation, ethical reflection, and advanced engineering. Our identity as a species was intimately tied to these unique capacities. But what happens when we create machines that can do all these things as well as we can, or even better? What happens to our self-understanding when the boundaries between human and non-human, between natural and artificial, between born and created, begin to dissolve? These questions are not merely philosophical or theoretical. They have deeply practical implications for how we will organize our societies in the coming decades. Consider the impact of automation and artificial intelligence on human labor. For millennia, work has been central not only to our material survival, but also to our identity, our sense of purpose, our social standing. Now we face the prospect of a world where an increasing share of traditional labor can be performed more efficiently by machines. Some foresee a utopian future of abundance and leisure where humans are freed from the need to work for subsistence and can dedicate themselves to higher pursuits of personal growth and creative expression. Others fear a dystopian future of extreme inequality, where those who control new technologies accumulate unprecedented wealth and power, while the majority become economically redundant, dependent on some form of universal basic income to survive. Whichever scenario materializes, it is clear we will need to fundamentally rethink our economic and social structures. The systems we developed over the past centuries, from industrial capitalism to the welfare state, were designed for a world in which human labor was the primary factor of production. What happens when that is no longer the case? How do we distribute the fruits of an increasingly automated economy? How do we find meaning and purpose in a world where traditional work is no longer available to many? These are questions that demand not just incremental policy adjustments, but potentially a complete reinvention of how we structure our societies or consider the implications of advanced biotechnology. As we gain greater control over our bodies and genomes, we will face profoundly challenging choices. Who will have access to human enhancement technologies? Will only the wealthy be able to afford to genetically improve their children, creating a new form of biological inequality that perpetuates itself across generations? Or will we find ways to democratize these technologies, making them accessible to all? And how do we collectively decide which types of modifications are acceptable? Where do we draw the line between curing diseases and enhancing normal capabilities? Who has the right to make these transformative decisions on behalf of future generations? I need to pause for a moment and ask you directly, which aspect of this technological future we are discussing most awakens your fear or apprehension? Do you lie awake at night thinking about it too? I know that many of us keep these worries to ourselves, perhaps afraid of seeming paranoid or technophobic in a world that celebrates every new innovation without question. But your concerns are valid and likely shared by far more people than you might imagine. Share in the comments. My greatest fear about our technological future is your voice can help create a space where we can honestly discuss these collective fears instead of suppressing them. And perhaps by naming these fears together, we can begin to imagine ways to face them. And perhaps the deepest revolution of all is that of artificial intelligence. For the first time in history, we are creating entities that could, in principle, surpass our cognitive capacities in virtually every domain. The development of general artificial intelligence systems that can learn and perform any intellectual task a human can represents an unprecedented turning point. Historically, humanity's privileged position in the world was anchored in our superior intelligence. We were the only beings capable of creating sophisticated tools, developing science and technology, and philosophically reflecting on our own existence. But what happens when we are no longer the most intelligent beings on the planet? What happens to our self-understanding when confronted with entities that can think faster, deeper, and with more information than we ever could? This is not a merely theoretical question. In recent years, we have witnessed remarkable advances in artificial intelligence. AI systems have already surpassed humans in complex strategy games like chess and Go, are learning to drive vehicles, diagnose diseases, create art and music, and write increasingly sophisticated texts. We are only at the beginning of this trajectory, and the pace of progress is accelerating. If we continue along this path, it is plausible that in the coming decades, we will develop artificial intelligence systems that are genuinely autonomous and self-aware, capable not only of performing specific tasks, but of setting their own goals and reflecting on their own existence. This places us before profound existential questions. What will the relationship between humans and advanced artificial intelligences be? Will we be partners, competitors, creators, and creations, or something entirely new? What rights and moral considerations should we extend to self-aware artificial entities. How do we ensure that advanced AI systems remain aligned with fundamental human values, especially if they become capable of redesigning and improving themselves in an accelerated evolutionary process that could quickly surpass our understanding? And perhaps most unsettling, what happens to the role of humans in a world where we are no longer the only or even the primary intelligent agents? Throughout our entire history, we have built our civilizations, cultures, power structures, and self-understanding on the premise that we were the only beings capable of abstract thought, long-term planning, aesthetic creation, and moral deliberation. What happens when that premise is no longer valid? These questions may seem distant or speculative, but the speed of technological advances suggests that we may have to face them much sooner than most of us imagine. The development of artificial intelligence is not following a linear progression, but an exponential one. What seemed like distant science fiction just a decade ago is rapidly becoming reality. And once we create genuinely autonomous AI systems capable of continuously improving themselves, the pace of change may accelerate even further, leading to transformations that are literally unpredictable to our limited human minds. This is a crucial point we must understand. We are entering uncharted territory, not only in practical terms, but in cognitive terms. Our minds evolved to deal with a specific set of challenges in relatively simple and stable environments. We struggle to truly grasp exponential processes, to visualize the long-term implications of transformational technologies, to imagine ways of being that are radically different from our human experience. That is why we often respond to these future possibilities with either naive optimism or apocalyptic fear, failing to develop a more nuanced understanding of the real possibilities and risks. And here we reach a fundamental paradox of our current condition. We are developing technologies that have the potential to radically transform what it means to be human, yet we are doing so with minds that are still, for the most part, the same ones that evolved on the African savannas hundreds of thousands of years ago. Our instincts, intuitions, and cognitive capacities were shaped for a world radically different from the one we are creating. We have 21st century tools, but Stone Age minds, and that discrepancy creates deep challenges for our ability to wisely navigate the future we are building. Consider how we instinctively respond to threats. Our biological alarm system was designed to react to immediate, tangible dangers: predators, human enemies, natural disasters. When confronted with a tiger, our bodies instantly enter fight or flight mode, mobilizing resources to face the immediate threat. This system worked beautifully for the environment in which we evolved, but it is poorly suited for the kinds of existential threats we now face. Risks such as climate change, nuclear war, or misaligned AI do not trigger our alarm systems in the same way because they are abstract, gradual, or probabilistic. As a result, we tend not to react with appropriate urgency, even when these threats pose far greater risks to our well-being and survival than any tiger ever did. Or consider how we form our identities. Evolutionarily, we defined ourselves primarily through our tribes, the small groups of 50 to 150 people with whom we interacted directly. Our moral psychology, our instincts for cooperation, our need for belonging, all were shaped by this original tribal context. Even as we built much larger societies, we tend to recreate tribal structures, dividing the world into us and them, projecting loyalty onto nations, religions, ideologies, or other markers of group identity. But the technologies we are now developing create challenges that are fundamentally global, that transcend all tribal and national boundaries. Our tribal psychology may be a critical obstacle to the global cooperation required to wisely navigate the risks and opportunities of transformational technologies. This is, perhaps, the most fundamental challenge we face. How to transcend the limitations of our evolved minds in order to wisely deal with technologies that have the potential to transform or even transcend our humanity. How do we develop the wisdom required to navigate a future that may be so different from the past that our traditional intuitions and heuristics become not only useless, but potentially dangerous? I have no simple answers to these questions, and I suspect no one does. We are collectively sailing in uncharted waters, and there are no reliable maps to guide us. But that does not mean we are completely disoriented. We can identify some promising directions, some lights that can help illuminate our path forward. First, we need to cultivate a deeper awareness of the limitations of our minds. Research in cognitive psychology, behavioral economics, and neuroscience over the past few decades has extensively mapped the biases and heuristics that shape our thinking, often in ways we do not consciously perceive. Understanding these cognitive patterns is not just an academic exercise, it is a practical tool for making better decisions. When we know that, we tend to overfocus on vivid, immediate risks while neglecting abstract or gradual threats. We can consciously correct that bias in our judgments. When we recognize our propensity for tribal thinking, we can actively work to expand our circle of moral concern. Second, we need to develop institutions and decision-making processes that compensate for our individual cognitive limitations. Our individual minds may be fallible, but collectively we can create systems that are wiser than any single person. This requires not only robust democratic institutions, but new forms of governance capable of effectively addressing global and long-term challenges. We need mechanisms that give voice to the interests of future generations, that facilitate global cooperation on existential issues, that integrate diverse perspectives into our decision-making processes. Third, and perhaps most importantly, we need to cultivate a new understanding of what it means to be human in this era of accelerated technological transformation. Throughout history, our sense of identity and purpose has been shaped by the limitations of our biological condition. We were finite beings with limited capacities, struggling to survive and thrive in a world often hostile to our existence. Now we face the possibility of transcending many of those limitations. We may potentially live much longer, think much more clearly, experience forms of being that our ancestors could scarcely imagine. But with these possibilities come deep questions. What do we wish to preserve of our current humanity as we embrace these new capabilities? Which values, relationships, and experiences are so fundamental to what we cherish about being human that we want to safeguard them even as we transcend our current biological limits? This last question, I believe, is the most fundamental of all. The technologies we are developing are not neutral. They embody values, priorities, worldviews. The decisions we make about how to develop and implement these technologies will reflect and in turn shape our understanding of what is important, what is valuable, what it means to live a good life. This is not a process that will happen automatically. It requires conscious reflection, open dialogue, deep engagement with the traditions of wisdom that humanity has cultivated over millennia, along with a willingness to radically rethink assumptions that once seemed immutable. One thing is certain: the future is not predetermined. Despite the astonishing pace of technological progress, we still have meaningful choices about how to develop and implement these transformational technologies. We can still collectively shape the world we are creating, but to do so effectively, we must recognize the magnitude of the transformation underway, confront honestly the existential questions it raises, and develop the collective wisdom required to navigate this uncharted territory. I do not claim to have all the answers. No one does. But by clearly naming the challenges we face, by consciously reflecting on the values we wish to preserve and promote as we move through this unknown terrain, we can at least begin to formulate the right questions. And perhaps by doing so together as a global community, engaged in open dialogue about our shared future, we may find a path that allows us to embrace the transformative possibilities of new technologies while preserving what is most precious in our humanity. The future will be what we make of it. And despite all uncertainties, I believe we still have the capacity to create a future that reflects the best of our humanity, that expands our capabilities without sacrificing what makes us truly human. But that will not happen automatically. It requires that we be conscious, intentional, collectively engaged in the task of shaping the technologies that in turn are reshaping us. It requires that we not be merely passive objects of technological change, but active agents in determining its direction and meaning, returning to the feeling we began with that awakening in the middle of the night, accompanied by the faint realization that something fundamental is changing. Now we can name that sensation more clearly. We are living in a moment of historical transition where the very meaning of being human is being redefined. This is not merely another era of change, but a change of era, perhaps the deepest in the history of our species. And although that may seem frightening, it is also an unprecedented opportunity. For the first time, we have the chance to consciously participate in redefining what it means to be human, to actively shape our future evolution, rather than merely being objects of blind evolutionary forces. What choices will we make with this extraordinary opportunity? What kind of future will we create together? These are the questions that define our age, and the answers we find together will determine not only the course of our individual lives, but potentially the future of all conscious life that originated on this small planet. If these reflections have touched something you've been feeling, but perhaps hadn't yet found the words to express, know that you are not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you will connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we gather here to explore together the great questions that define our era, and to seek not only understanding, but also wiser ways of living amid the transformations we are witnessing. This is not just a channel, it is a space for dialogue and collective growth. Join us on this ongoing journey. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to live with greater wisdom and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented and divided. One of the reasons that the order of the world is collapsing is that we have deficit of trust, and it makes us extremely vulnerable to AI, and it also guarantees a very dangerous kind of AI that will try and probably succeed in taking the world from us. You can think about AIs as the children of humanity. When you try to educate children, there are the things you say to them, and there are the things they observe you actually do. And your behavior has far more influence on their education than what you tell them to do. So if we kind of tell our AIs, don't be power hungry, don't be untrustworthy, don't cheat, don't lie, don't manipulate, and then the AI observes us constantly manipulating and cheating and grabbing power, the AI will learn from how we behave. If the AI tycoon himself, or in rare cases herself, behaves in an untrustworthy way, he himself believes that all the world is just a power struggle, there is no way that he can produce a trustworthy AI. The good news is that this entire worldview is not just cynical and dangerous, it's also a mistake. It's not true that the only reality is power and that all human interactions are power struggles. Yes, power is an important part of the world. Yes, some human interactions or some part of human interactions, they are power struggles. And yes, some institutions or all institutions, they have problem with corruption, they have problem with people manipulating, but this is not the whole of reality. There are other aspects to human beings. Human beings, I think, are all of them, except if there are some extreme psychopaths, they are genuinely interested in love, in compassion, in truth. This is not some cynical maneuver to gain power. What I would tell people who believe in the cynical, power-hungry worldview is just observe yourself. Is this the way you think about yourself? Do you think that you yourself don't care at all about the truth and you just want power? Probably not. You probably think you're different. If you have a better view of yourself, why aren't you charitable enough to acknowledge that other people, just like you, might also be really interested in knowing the truth or in having loving relationships with other beings? This is where we can start to build a more trustworthy philosophy, which is the only stable foundation for a good society and also for benevolent AIs.
So you are a you studied the military history of the Middle East. Did you ever expect to now be the foremost expert on all things AI and whether we are doomed as humanity?
I'm not the foremost expert, but I didn't expect to be talking about AI with such an audience. As you said, I was originally a specialist in medieval military history, and but the Middle Ages are coming back in many ways.
Okay. Okay, we're going to get into that. And then feel free to get into that as I ask you this first question. You call artificial intelligence, or alien intelligence as you refer to it throughout your writing, the rise of a new species that could replace Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
Sapiens, your prior book. What does it mean to be human right now?
To be aware that for the first time we have real competition on the planet. That we have been the most intelligent species by far for tens of thousands of years, and this is how we got from being an insignificant ape in a corner of Africa to being the absolute rulers of the planet and of the ecosystem. And now we are creating something that could compete with us in the very near future. The most important thing to know about AI is that it is not a tool like all previous human inventions. It is an agent. An agent in the sense that it can make decisions independently of us. It can invent new ideas. It can learn and change by itself. All previous human inventions, whether a printing press or the atom bomb, they are tools that empower us.
They needed us.
They need us because a printing press cannot write books by itself, and it cannot decide which books to print. An atom bomb cannot invent the next more powerful bomb, and an atom bomb cannot decide what to attack. An AI weapon can decide by itself which target to attack and design the next generation of weapons by itself.
So this is why you argue that AI is potentially, or it sounds like you're saying is, by the way now, but you've written in the past, potentially more momentous in the invention of the telegraph, the printing press, even writing. But the way you talk about it in Nexus is that it is a baby.
Yeah.
Because it learns from us. And therefore, your argument is that we, especially the powerful leaders in this room, have a lot of responsibility because how we act is how AI will be. You cannot expect to lie and cheat and have benevolent AI.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Yeah, there is a big discussion around the world about AI alignment. Okay, we are creating these increasingly super intelligent, very powerful new agents. How do we make sure that these agents remain aligned with human goals and with the benefit of humanity, that they do what is good for us? And so there is a lot of research and a lot of efforts focused on the idea that if we can design these AIs in a certain way, if we can teach them certain principles, if we can code into them certain goals, then we will be safe. But there are two main problems with this approach. First of all, again, the very definition of AI is that it can learn and change by itself. If you have a machine that can act automatically, but only following pre-programmed orders, then, it's a coffee machine. It can do something automatically, produce coffee, but it cannot decide or invent anything by itself. It's not an AI. So when you design an AI, by definition, this thing is going to do all kinds of things which you cannot anticipate. If you can anticipate everything it will do, it is by definition not an AI. So that's one problem. The other even bigger problem, that we can think about AI, like you said, like a baby or a child. And you can educate a child to the best of your ability, and he or she will still surprise you, for better or worse. No matter how much you invest in their education, they are independent agents. They might eventually do something which will surprise you and even horrify you. The other thing is, everybody who has any knowledge of education knows that in the education of children, it matters far less what you tell them
And what you do.
It matters far more what you do.
Yeah.
If you tell your kids, don't lie, and your kids watch you lying to other people, they will copy your behavior, not your instructions. Now, if we have now these big projects to educate the AIs, not to lie, but the AIs are given access to the world, and they watch how humans behave, and they see some of the most powerful humans on the planet, including their parents, lying, the AI will copy the behavior. People who think that I can run, say, this huge AI corporation, and while I'm lying, I will teach my AIs not to lie, it will not work. It will copy your behavior.
One of your central arguments is that we as society writ large have focused way too much on power. And you also make the argument that some disagree with or would call counterintuitive, that more information is great for democracies because you say all information is not true information, etc.
Most information is not the truth.
Right.
There's a huge confusion between information and truth. Yeah. Yes, some information is true, and you get information to get to know the truth, but generally the truth is a very, very small subset of most of the information in the universe.
So if we are focusing too much on power, and that's a very important distinction, you say this is why we have failed as people largely to answer actually the biggest questions of life. If we can be more productive, we can be richer, we can have stronger militaries. But many of us can't answer the question, as you write, who are we? What should we aspire to? And what is a good life? Essentially, we are accumulating power, not wisdom.
Yeah.
How can we change it?
And that's the big problem of human history, for thousands of years. We are extremely good in acquiring more power. Again, this is how we transform ourselves from an insignificant ape in East Africa into the ruler of the world. We can fly to the moon, we can split the atom. But we don't seem to be significantly happier than we were in the Stone Age. We don't know how to translate power into happiness. Again, you look at the most powerful people on the planet, they don't seem to be the happiest people on the planet. So there is a very...
Do you want to ask them? There are many of them.
I'm not necessarily referring to the people in this room. Again, I want to clarify, I don't think there is a contradiction between power and happiness. I don't think that as you acquire more power, you necessarily become miserable. No. But there is no... It can go together, but it doesn't necessarily go together. And as a species, we have not been particularly good in translating power into happiness or even into knowledge and wisdom. Again, we tend to confuse intelligence with knowledge and with truth. But we are the most intelligent species on the planet. We are also the most delusional species on the planet. And
destructive, you argue.
And self-destructive, yeah. The kind of things that people believe, no other animal on the planet will believe such nonsense. Except, if I look at my own country, you would not find any animal that believes that if you go and kill other members of your species, you will be rewarded after death by entering paradise. No chimpanzee will believe that. No horse would believe that. No wolf will believe that. Millions of people believe that, and they believe it so strongly that they actually go and kill people in the expectation that as a result they will be rewarded in paradise with whatever.
We took a really interesting poll this morning asking the leaders in this room how consequential they think AI has been so far in their business. And actually only the businesses they lead, and only a small portion said significantly. Most it was moderately or not at all. Can you speak to them as if we were sitting here 36 months from now? Is there any world in which AI doesn't have a significant impact on their business?
It depends on their business, but in most fields, again, the question is one of time scale. I've been talking to a lot of the people who lead the AI revolution, and many of them say, we are already in the middle of the AI revolution, we still haven't seen anything really major. And that's just the difference between how historians view time and how CEOs and entrepreneurs view time. For an entrepreneur, 2 years is a long time. For historians, it's nothing. It's like, imagine that we are now sitting in London and the year is 1835. The first railway has been opened between Manchester and Liverpool 5 years ago. And we have now this conference in London in 1835, and people saying, all this talk about railways changing the world, the Industrial Revolution, this is nonsense. We have had railways for ages, 5 years. And look, so there is some changes that they now have people traveling with the trains, or they move around coal more easily. But nothing major happened. Because there is a time lag between the invention of a technology and the moment when you see the actual social and political consequences. So we now know that the Industrial Revolution and trains, they completely transformed everything. Geopolitics, the way people fight wars, the economy, family structure, but it just took more than 5 years. The same is likely to happen with AI. all fields from the obvious to the less obvious. Like, I think that one of the first fields we'll see major changes is finance.
Okay.
That AI is going very quickly to take over the financial system.
We have some bankers in the room, so tell us more.
Because finance is the ideal playing ground for AI. It's purely an informational realm. If you want to have an AI self-driving vehicle on the road, which has been promised again and again, and we are still not there, the problem...
Waymo.
Yeah, but you go around London, you don't see these tens of thousands of self-driving vehicles yet. I just passed my first driving lesson
Congratulations.
here in the UK, and you still need to learn how to drive.
Okay.
So the problem is that for driving, you need to deal with the messy physical world of pedestrians and holes in the roads and whatever. But in finance, it's only information in, information out. It's much easier for an AI to master that. And what happens to finance once AIs, for instance, start inventing new financial devices that the human brain is simply incapable of dealing with because it's mathematically too complex? We are going to see AI changing even things like religion.
How?
At least religions which are based on texts, like Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, they give ultimate authority to the text, not to any human being. Now, until today, humans were nevertheless the main authority in these religions because the texts could not speak. The Bible could not interpret itself. The Bible could not answer your questions, so you needed a human being as an intermediary. What happens when you have an AI text that can speak for itself? No Jewish rabbi can know all the texts of Judaism because there are too many of them. For the first time in history, there is something on the planet that is able to remember every single word in every writing of every rabbi in the last 2,000 years and talk back to you and explain and defend its views. So I have friends who are now working on building religious AIs that are meant to either augment or replace human religious leaders, especially in text-based religions. If the religion is not based on texts, it doesn't give authority to a text, it's a different story.
Okay, but I go, and we're going to questions next. I'm going to come first to Mattia Moore if you want to raise your hand, and we'll get you a microphone. But I go and talk to my pastor at our church when I am going through a difficult time. I am never going to talk to ChatGPT like that.
But it's an individual choice.
So you think some will?
I know that already millions of people do it. I mean, I know people who go for now AIs to get psychological counseling.
Yes.
That AI is their best friend, like teenagers. Something happened in school, they consult with, they tell the AI what happened and ask for advice about relationships.
So let me get back to, and then the question is next, let me get back to what you said, though, about replacing jobs. This is really important, and you write and talk a lot about what you're worried about, what it becomes a useless class. That's what you've talked about. And it was 5 or 6 years ago, I interviewed Google CEO Sundar Pichai in Oklahoma in one of their data centers. We need many, many more of them now to power AI. And I remember asking him about AI. It was, people were talking about it a lot then, and he essentially told me, and I'm paraphrasing here, that if AI proves to be, quote, in his words, very disruptive to too many American jobs, he essentially said they would be open to slowing it down. Okay. I'm talking about this, not just Google, just writ large, these companies right now. If we are headed for what you're talking about, a potential useless class, many, interestingly, white-collar jobs, so it's getting a little bit more attention, perhaps, than when it replaced blue-collar jobs, which is a whole issue in and of itself. What do we do to make sure we as a society not only survive, but thrive?
I want to emphasize that AI has enormous positive potential as well as dangerous potential. And I don't believe in historical or in technological determinism. You can use the same technology to create completely different kinds of societies. We saw it in the 20th century that you used exactly the same technology to build communist totalitarian regimes, and liberal democracies.
That's right.
It's the same with AI. We have a lot of choices about what to do with it, if, again, provided we remember that for the first time we are dealing with agents and not tools. So it makes it much more complicated. But we do have still, most of the agency is in our hands. And the question of how we develop the technology, and even more importantly, how we deploy it, we can make a lot of choices there.
We have agency in how we move forward. We don't have a choice that it has come.
Yeah.
We have power in how we use it and go through it.
Absolutely. The main problem is that now the companies and countries that lead the AI revolution has been locked into an arms race situation. So even if they know that it would be better to slow down, to invest more in safety, to be careful about this or that potential development, they are constantly afraid that if we slow down and they don't slow down, they will take over the world.
So let's get to some questions here. Mattia Moore with Emotion Network. Hi, yes, right here.
Hi. So congratulations, because I mean your books are really eye-opening, and so you gave already a lot of answers through your books and also today. We as a company, we have a conference called Tech Emotion because we strongly believe in the power of mixing technology and innovation with emotion, creativity, and culture. But and in what you're saying, this is a lot of a mix of this. So what I think it's really interesting what you are saying about. Also the effect on religion, the effect on the soul of the people, and this is also related to what she was saying about the purpose of the life of the people that is going to be destroyed or changed a lot by AI, by all these innovations. So how do you think it's possible to get a future where people is going to be more satisfied and more happy and also find more purpose in what they do with the difficulties that this world is changing? So I know this is a big question, but I think that is the most important thing in our life, much more than business, but more than anything else.
Yeah, so it's a very big subject. The most important thing, I only have time to talk about one thing. So the most important thing is that we need to solve our own human problems instead of relying on the AI to do it for us. And the key problem is the problem of trust and cooperation. At the present moment, trust is collapsing all over the world, both between countries and within societies. And the hope that, okay, humans can no longer trust each other, so the international system and the trade system and everything is collapsing, but the AI will save us, will solve. No, it will not. In a world in which humans compete with each other ferociously and cannot trust each other, the AI produced by such a world will be a ferocious, competitive, untrustworthy AI. It's not possible for humans, as they engaged in this ferocious competition, to create benevolent, trustworthy AI. It will just not happen. So if you think about it, it's just a question of priority. We have now this big human trust problem, and we have the issue, how do we develop AI? Too many people think, okay, let's first solve the how do we develop AI problem, and then this will solve the human trust problem. It will not work. We need to get our priorities the other way. First solve the human trust problem, then together we can create benevolent AI. Of course, this is not what is happening right now in the world.
Do we have one more? Yes, right here.
Thanks very much, Yuval. Quick question from me. So, in human history, there's been organizing principles, and you write about that so much in your books. And there's been, in some senses, at least geographically, monolithic organizing principles, like religion and the church was one of those. But when we talk about AI, we're not talking about something that is monolithic, right? There is no the AI. This is really effectively going to be multiple plethoras of AIs manifesting themselves.
Absolutely.
And in that context, when you describe AI replacing religion in some sense, I think the real question for me is when you have no single organizing principle, there is no the AI that gets developed with any kind of intent, whether that intent is benevolent or otherwise, and there's all of these competing AIs that are effectively evolving fast. What does that world look like?
That's a very, very important point. I mean, the AI will not be one big AI. We are talking about potentially millions or billions of new AI agents with different characteristics, again, produced by different companies, different countries, everywhere. In the military, in the financial system, in the religious system. So you'll have a lot of religious AIs competing with each other. Which AI will be the authoritative AI rabbi for which currents of Judaism? And the same in Islam, and the same in Hinduism, and in Buddhism, and so forth. So you will have competition there. And in the financial system. And we just have no idea what the outcome will be. We have thousands of years of experience with human societies. What happens when millions of humans compete for economic power, for religious authority? It's very complex, but we at least have some experience in how these things develop. We have zero experience in what happens in AI societies when millions of AIs compete with each other.
How can humanity flourish in the era of AI? The answer is simple. Together, humans can control AI. But if we fight one another, AI will control us. Therefore, we should build more trust between humans before we develop truly super intelligent AI agents. Unfortunately, at present, we are doing exactly the opposite. All over the world, trust between humans is collapsing. The crisis of trust results from a big misunderstanding. Too many countries think that to be strong means to trust no one and to be completely separated from the others. But complete separation is impossible. Indeed, in nature, complete separation is death. Think about the human body as an example. Every minute, we breathe in and out, in and out. Every breath we take is a small gesture of trust in what is outside us. We take air from the outside into our lungs, into our body, and later give it back to the universe. This trusting in and out movement is the rhythm of life. If we distrust everything outside us and therefore stop this in and out movement, we die. Why is it that after thousands of years of history, of developing, sophisticated networks of information and communication, our information is not getting any better? I mean, at the present moment, you can say that humans have the best, the most sophisticated information technology in history, and we are losing the ability to even talk with each other and to listen and to hold a reasonable conversation.
What do you have to say to democratic countries, where we also see a bombarding of information like this impacting the democracy?
Democracy, in essence, is a conversation between a large number of people, which has strong self-correcting mechanisms. You need to keep the conversation, and to have a conversation, you must have many voices. If there is only one voice which is allowed to be heard, this is not a conversation. This is a dictatorship. This is a monologue, a dictate. The other thing is, a country must have a self-correcting mechanism, especially for the government, that if the government make a mistake, there is an independent media, there are independent courts that can expose and correct the mistake of the government, and ultimately, there are free and fair elections in which the people can replace the government. As long as you have these mechanisms, democracies are safe. You can have different governments with this policy or that policy and experiment. As long as there are these checks and balances and the ultimate ability to replace the government, then the democracy is safe. The danger in every democracy, and this goes back thousands of years, in a democracy you give one person or one party the power for a limited duration, on condition they afterwards give it back to the people, and the people can make a different choice next time. The danger is, what if you give power to someone who then doesn't give it back. They use the power they have to take over the institutions, to rig the elections, to control the media, and then you can never replace them. That was always the big dangers in democracy. You can have strong institutions, but government ultimately is able to corrupt all these institutions. So people should make wise choices and be very careful not to give power to people who might not want to give it back.